Today we're talking about the classic ballad Misty by Errol Garner. We'll take a look at the chords so we can figure out how to most efficiently learn it and find out what harmonic secrets we can discover in the process. Let's do this thing. So Misty is a classic jazz ballad. Everybody needs to know this tune, but there are a lot of harmonic twists and turns in it that can make it a little bit difficult to memorize the chords. So let's simplify it, but first listen to what it sounds like. So the most important thing, of course, when learning the chord changes to any tune is to make sure that you know the melody really well. And the best way to learn the melody is by ear. And if that sounds like something completely intimidating, like you have no idea how to go about doing it, I've never done that before, then definitely follow my list process for learning jazz standards, which is listen, internalize, sing, and transfer. And I talk a lot more about that in my free guide called Learn Jazz Standards the Smart Way, which I'll leave a link to in the description as well as in the show notes. But taking a look at Misty, the first chord that we have here is E flat major. And we know that that is actually the key of the tune because there are 3 flats here in the key signature. So E flat major, all right? So first chord is E flat major. So easy to remember, it is the 1 chord in the key of the song, E flat major. Now, whenever I'm trying to memorize chords, I like to make things easy to understand by categorizing them. And as we start going through this, we'll start seeing how I do that. So for example, I want to look forward here and I see that we have an A flat major 7 coming up. And the way we get there is through a B flat minor 7 and an E flat major 7. So we start with E flat major 7 going to B flat minor 7 to E flat 7 to A flat major 7. Now, the A flat major is actually the 4 chord of E flat major. So that A flat is the 4 chord, and we get there through a 2-5-1. And that's B flat minor 7 to E flat 7 going to A flat major 7. So I'm always looking for in jazz different key centers that we're going to and how they arrive there. And oftentimes we're arriving there by 2-5-1s. But at the same time, I'm also looking at how do these chords, these new key centers, relate to the parent key center. So really when we're talking about this transition from E flat major to A flat major is still the 4 chord in E flat major. So really important to understand your Roman numeral analysis of chord changes. But already this is going to help me out quite a bit because I can already just understand that the first 3 bars is a 1 to a 4 chord. But of course, we're going to tonicize that 4 chord with a B flat minor 7 to an E flat 7. Now, moving on, we have an A flat minor 7 to a D flat 7. So we just got to that A flat major 7. Then we're going to the A flat minor 7, D flat 7. In the melody, that's the, which is also another really important point when trying to memorize chord changes, is always make sure you're able to relate the melody back to the chord changes you're learning. So whether you're a saxophone player, piano player, guitar player, really doesn't matter. Make sure that melody is locked in to your understanding of where you're actually at with the chords. And by doing that, you're going to get lost a lot less often as well. Now, again, whenever I'm studying chords and I'm analyzing them, I always want to make sure I understand what chords came before. In this case, it was an A flat major 7, and what chord comes afterwards. And what chord comes afterwards is an E flat major 7. Because initially when I look at this A flat minor and D flat 7, I think to myself, that's a 2-5 in G flat major. However, if we look ahead to the chord it resolves to, E flat major, it actually does not resolve to a G flat major. So what's really actually going on here? Well, yes, it's what we could call a deceptive cadence, a cadence that does not resolve where you think it's going to go. However, really all we're trying to do is get from A flat major over here back to E flat major again. The way we're doing that is something called a backdoor dominant. And that backdoor dominant is this right here, the D flat 7, right? So we go A flat minor 7, D flat 7 to E flat major 7. Okay, now the D flat 7, we call this a backdoor dominant. A normal dominant 7th chord, like how we're gonna get back to the 1 chord, would be like any kind of B flat 7 chord going to E flat major, right? So a 5 to 1 chord, right? But we call it a backdoor dominant when we're going a whole step below the chord we're arriving to. So D flat 7, D flat is a whole step below E flat major, right? But we're using a dominant 7th chord and arriving back at that E flat major 7. When we really analyze this, you know, we can kind of see that there are some altered tones within that D flat 7 that would be altered tones within the B flat 7. So it gives us this sense of tension that would be in that B flat 7, even though it's a D flat 7, right? And so there's still this tension and release feeling when we go A flat minor 7, D flat 7, E flat major 7. But regardless of whether you fully understand the theory behind all of that isn't quite as important as understanding that all this happens all the time in jazz standards. You're going to see this whole step relationship from a dominant 7th chord arriving back to a tonic or a 1 chord, right? And when you see that, you can at least name it a backdoor dominant, and that's going to help you categorize the tune a little bit better, help you memorize it a little bit easier. Okay, so the next 4 bars are what we call a classic turnaround. We have an E flat major 7, C minor 7, F minor 7, B flat 7, and that is a classic 1, 6, 2, 5 chord progression, okay? So this is one of the most common chord progressions in jazz. Good that you get to know this chord progression in every single key, right? Not just D flat major, but every single key. Now, it's pretty common, by the way, in jazz when we're doing a turnaround that's gonna go back around to a second A section. In this case, this is A1, and down over here is A2. So we're trying to do that. We're gonna go 1, 6, 2, 5, and then a 3 instead of a 1 again. So 3, 6, 2, 5. So G minor 7, C7, F minor 7, B flat 7. And the reason why that works is because the 3 and the 1 are interchangeable. I have these chords in parentheses, which is G7 and F7, because you can also turn really any minor 7th chord in a diatonic series into a dominant 7th chord as well, and it turns them into what we call secondary dominants. And a secondary dominant is when we are tonicizing any chord, any diatonic chord within the series with a dominant 7th chord. Okay, so over here in bar 9, we're back and essentially doing A2. So E flat major 7 to B flat minor 7, E flat 7 to A flat major 7, A flat minor 7, D flat 7. That's that backdoor dominant to the 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. Now, oftentimes, again, when we're talking about different A sections, we are thinking of them as similar, right? They're almost always similar to each other. So A1 is almost exactly the same as A2 in most jazz standards. Usually it's the last 2 bars of the A section that are different, and usually the last A section, the second A section, it resolves to a 1 chord where it kind of resolves, versus the first, it helps turn you around to the top again. So essentially what I'm saying is if you understand the first A really well, if you learn the first A, that means you basically have the song. Actually, it means you've learned the song 75% if it's an AABA form like Misty is, because you already know 1A, now you know the second A with one slight variation, and that means you know the third A, because the third A is almost always the same as the second A. We'll take a look at that in 1 second. Okay, so now before we move on, by the way, I just wanted to mention that we actually have a full study of Misty in our LJS Inner Circle membership. So we have obviously this chord analysis, but improvisation exercises that we do, a training video, a composed solo that you can learn from our in-house composer, and a really awesome community of other musicians who are all working and practicing that tune together, and practice itineraries to help you learn in 1 month. So if you're interested in checking that out, do check out the link in the description or in the show notes if you're interested in the full study. So with that being said, it just means we now have to learn 25% of the song, which is the bridge, the B section. And we start the B section with a 2, 5, 1 to A flat major. Now I have this color-coded yellow because blue means the parent key center, E flat major, And yellow means tonicizing the 4 chord, A flat major, right? So we have a lot of yellow here on the sheet. So we have B flat minor 7, E flat 7, A flat major 7. Now again, important to relate the melody to what these chords are. Right? That's the melody of that section right there. So having the melody as the context is really important to helping you memorize the chords once again. But again, as long as we understand diatonic harmony, we see that this is B flat minor 7 is a 2, E flat 7 is a 5, and A flat major 7 is a 4 chord. And then we have this brief E flat 7 5 going back to the A flat major because it sits on that A flat major for 2 bars otherwise, right? So basically just a 2-5-1 to the 4 chord. So as long as we understand our diatonic series and how it all works, then we can start categorizing this. The bridge is essentially starting out by going to the 4 chord. Now it's really just the next 4 bars that's the hardest to memorize in Misty. And that's because we start going outside of diatonic land, which we've mostly done to this point, other than this backdoor dominant sequence, that deceptive cadence that we talked about, which I color coded in green. Okay. So now we have this transition from A flat major. Now we're going up a half step to A minor 7. Okay. So A minor 7 to D7. The way I would remember that is just simply going, okay, all we have to do is start playing a 2 chord, a half step up from A flat major 7, which is A minor 7 to D7. Now, I like to think about this as a hybrid 2-5 of 3, right? Because if we think about what the 3 chord is of E flat major, it's G minor. So A minor 7 flat 5, D7 would be a 2-5 of 3 of G minor, but that's not what's happening because we have an A minor 7, meaning that it's almost like we're borrowing from G major. I call that a hybrid 2-5. Again, not so important that you don't completely understand that theory there, but more just to go, all right, this is like a 2-5 to G minor or G major, whichever one you like to think about it. That doesn't resolve, then it goes to a 2-5-1 to B flat major. So C minor 7, F7, B flat major. Then some blues harmony with this E diminished 7th, which really is just chromatically moving from the E to the F minor 7. F minor 7 is the 2-5 that brings us back to the 1 for the last A section. So again, let's go back to these last 4 bars of the bridge, because again, they're kind of the trickiest. We're going up a half step from A flat major to A minor 7, D7, right? It's like a 2-5 to G of some sort. Then we're going 2-5-1 of B flat major 7. Okay. Now again, B flat major 7, it's not related to E flat major, right? So that's where it can get a little bit confusing. So whatever works for you to help make that connection, I like to think of, well, B flat is the 5th tone of the E flat major scale. So I'm basically just playing a 2-5 to the 5th before I go to E flat major again. So this really is a section that is really gonna need some extra memorization, right? Versus just categorizing things, but still all this can be helpful. So A minor 7, D7, C7, F7, B flat major 7, E diminished 7, F minor 7, B flat 7, back to the top of the A section, right? Now you'll often see in real books this kind of simplified version right here, A minor 7, D7, G minor 7, C7, and then F minor 7, B flat 7. So it just goes that A minor 7 for 1 bar, the D7 for 2 bars, and G minor 7, C7, F minor 7, B flat 7. So that's like a simplified version that you'll see in real books and lead sheets sometimes for Misty, but the original changes are A minor 7, D7, C minor 7, F7, B flat major 7, E diminished 7, F minor 7, B flat 7. Okay. So now we're back onto the last A section, which again is really just an exact copy of the second A section. We have the 1 chord to a 2-5 to 4 to A flat minor to D flat 7. That's that backdoor dominant to 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. So the next big question obviously is, how do I start improvising over top of these chord changes? Because some of these chord changes are simple, like 2-5-1s, or they're more complicated. Either way, you need to learn how to improvise over chord progressions as jazz musicians. So I have a video on the screen right now called How to Go From Amateur to Pro Level Solos. It's gonna help give you some strategies right away that you can start applying to some of these common chord progressions, and it's gonna help you start sounding great on Misty. So check that video out on the screen right now. Hope you found this video helpful. If you did, make sure you like it, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.